Babes, honey, babes, snaps. I don't know what I watched today, but apparently, according to the BBC and Disney, I watched Doctor Who. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters, not by myself. Before we get started, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, switch on the notification bells so that you know I am releasing another video. I talk about Doctor Who every Sunday, but with the current series going on, obviously I will have some more Doctor Who content. I know that's not for everyone, so those people who join me for woke, I do release my woke content during the week, so please be sure to tune in for those. A little disclaimer though, before we begin the review of Lux, it's absolutely fine to like this Doctor and to like this story. You can do that. We can agree to disagree. We can like what we like and we don't have to like what somebody else likes. Okay, so I just wanted to start with that. Please let me know what you think of Lux in the comments below. Naturally, I am bound to miss something out. The story starts in 1952. We see some old film footage. The scene is set quite nicely, actually. We see people in the cinema, which is called Palazzo Picture House. The moviegoers are going to watch Mr. Ringading, an animated movie. However, by the light of the moon, a mysterious being flows down into the light of the movie projector and gets beamed onto the screen into the animation. This brings Mr. Ringading to be a more corporeal form, and then he is able to leave the setting of the animated film that he is in and start interacting with the audience. It cuts to the opening titles, and then we see the Doctor, unusually working in the TARDIS. He doesn't do that much these days. The Doctor failed to get Belinda home. What a surprise. So he has created a vortex indicator, which he unoriginally calls a vindicator. This vindicator, it casts a signal anywhere so that they can be pulled into May 24th, 2025. It doesn't work in this story as far as we can tell. However, I'm sure that it will work the week before the final story. The TARDIS lands in 1952. Intrigued, they both go out in 1950s clothing, and Belinda looks at the Palazzo Picture House. She sees the name Rock Hudson and they start talking about him. Underneath that is a title of a movie called The Harvest Bringer. Of course, this is not going to be a play on words, is it? They discover flowers laid outside the picture house. They find out that people have gone missing. So they go to a local diner and they ask questions. The people that were missing have been missing for 3 months. No one knew what happened to these people. However, there are movies playing at night. We meet Tommy Lee's mother. Now, Tommy Lee is the mother of one of the youngsters that have gone missing, and she's choosing to wait at the diner because she believes he will come back. They break into the picture house, the Doctor and Belinda do, and they start looking around for the caretaker, Mr. Pye. However, there doesn't seem to be anyone around. They hear a sound and they meet Mr. Ringading. Belinda does not believe that he could be real. However, the Doctor is not fooled, and he believes that Mr. Ringading has some form of corporeal form, and they discover that it is Mr. Ringading who has essentially taken those people away. They just don't know how at this point. And he also keeps repeating, "Don't make me laugh." The Doctor asks why, and then we hear the laugh from the giggle. Mr. Ringading also works out that the Doctor is the person who brought down the maestro, Sutek, and the toy maker. The title of the movie then changes outside from the Harvest Bringer to Harbinger, meaning that Mr. Ringading is a pantheon of the god. He is known as Lux Imperator. I think I've said that correctly, and it's known as the god of light. So yes, once again, we are dealing with the pantheon of the gods of chaos. Mr. Ringading tries to capture the Doctor and Belinda. However, Mr. Pye plays Ringading's song, and therefore Mr. Ringading must do the entire song, and they're able to get away. And they have just over a minute to talk to Mr. Pye to try and work out what is going on. He tells them the reason why he stays at night is because he has the movie footage of his wife who had passed away. And Mr. Ringading had essentially brought her to life, I guess you could say. So he does not leave the picture house, and they have not been outside for 3 months, both of them. Okay. And they also discover in this scene that the audience members were taken and placed into the film cells, and that's where they remain. Mr. Ringading catches up with them and he tells them that the movie footage will explode when exposed to fire. Mr. Ringading doesn't tell the Doctor how to defeat him, though, even though the Doctor says it's in the rules that he has to, like they're playing some kind of game. And so Mr. Ringading turns them into cartoons, and the only way they can get out of being 2D cartoons is by having in-depth thought. This turns them back into real people, but they are still stuck inside the film. Now they start pulling the film down and somehow they manage to escape, or at least that's what we think. However, the Doctor knows that's not the case, and we go back into the film setting and they push open a screen and then enter some people's living room. And this is the Doctor Who fan segment where they waste 5 minutes talking about being fans and how they know the ending, and because it's so obvious. So once they're done with that scene, that added absolutely nothing to the plot. They returned to the TV. Well, no, not to the TV. I think they blinked actually and everything went back to normal. And they decide to put a stop to the film cells moving and rolling, and the Doctor implies that, but Belinda suggests it. Now, whilst doing that, the Doctor burns his hand. He wastes some regeneration energy. Mr. Ringading sees that, and he wants the Doctor's light, or in this case, his regeneration energy with all that light that goes into it. So he captures the Doctor and starts absorbing the regeneration energy. The Doctor keeps hinting that he knows what the time of day is. Belinda cottons on to that and then decides that they need to make an explosion. They explode a load of light into the picture house. Mr. Pye does that for her. He sacrifices himself. This means that the Doctor and Belinda are able to escape. Mr. Ringading absorbs too much light and escapes the theatre and dissipates into light in outer space, and all the people who were captured were freed. The Doctor and Belinda returned to the TARDIS. Mrs. Flood briefly appears and speaks about the date, May the 24th, and the episode ends there. The story ends there, excuse me. I'm going to give my rating for this story a 4 out of 10. It would have been higher than last week's originally. However, a lot of things let this story down, and I've been thinking about this all day. I watched it on iPlayer, so I've been thinking about it all day and processing everything that happened in this story in my mind. And the reason why I did it that way, I don't always do it, but I wanted to see if my mind changed about whether or not this was the right score to give it. And whilst it could have been higher, unfortunately, it's a shame. It's got to be a 4 because there was so many things that let this story down, and yet at the same time there was so many things that could have made this story fantastic. Now, where do I begin with this story? I think I will start by saying something like this. So this is very much a Disney-esque style of storytelling with the terms of how this was presented onto the screen. What I mean by that is Disney quite often put 2D animation in with the live actors, or they do it the other way around. We've seen that with things like Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and Song of the South, just to name a few. I know that's not all of them. You know, you've also got Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In that regards, it is nothing new, and I wondered if that might have been some of the influence that Disney may have had over this. I know people will say that Disney have no say in this whatsoever. However, if you are putting this much money into an investment like this, you're going to have some kind of say with what's going on. And if the rumours are true, then Ncuti Gatwa and Russell T Davies are gone at the request of Disney. The question is, does this style suit Doctor Who? All right, I think this suits Disney's Doctor Who. I do like the concept and the idea behind this, having a 2D animated film and a character being brought to life by the power of the light of the moon. I do like it, but there's not a lot of threat to it. It was pretty ineffectual, and I can't help but think that it could have been scarier. You know, had this character ended up with a much fuller corporeal form. So start by being 2D, but the more light that is fed into it via the projection that we see, the more he becomes real. It was just something that they were trying to do at the end almost, but it was too late by that point. He just dissipates, and it wasn't anticlimactic, but I felt they could have just executed it better. I think they probably needed more time. This is one of those stories that doesn't necessarily need to be a two-parter, but if it had an extra 15 minutes, I think it would have benefited from that. However, they didn't, if they hadn't have spent a good 5 minutes messing around, we could have perhaps had some more time with Mr. Ringading himself. I thought in this case that Mr. Ringading was very much underused, and that is a shame in itself, because you're using a very well-established actor by the name of Alan Cumming, and you're underusing him. The character itself isn't scary. The voiceover for him, though, is extremely good, and I do appreciate how he was animated. I also like historical settings, so they kept the animation as best as they could for Mr. Ringading within that time period. From what I could see, it looked it anyway. Whether or not it was hand drawn, I don't know. I think it would have been a great idea if it were hand drawn. I thought that the opening with Mr. Ringading was a better opening than what we got for the Robot Revolution, and it looked like it was going to be setting up a pretty good story for this type of New Who. Other than that, Mr. Ringading really didn't do all that much other than what I have stated. So yes, I would have liked to have seen more with Mr. Ringading, much like that we got with Maestro and Sutek and the Celestial Toymaker. Oh, sorry, Toymaker. No matter what we thought of these stories, we did have plenty of time with those characters. Now, it might be because in this case, Mr. Ringading, well, he's animated. So could it have been a bit like a Sutek moment? Could this have potentially used up a lot of their budget had they allocated more screen time to Mr. Ringading? And obviously they don't want to do that. Now, Mr. Ringading being the god of light as well, I'm not surprised. I didn't know which god he was going to be, but I had a very sneaking suspicion that he was going to be a god, especially after we see the word from the trailers, photographs, Harbinger, which has been associated with the other pantheons in the previous stories. It's come up a lot, and I put this as a downer, the word Harbinger. And it was a downer because I knew it was coming, because they kept giving it away. It's why I stopped watching the trailers and the little teasers in the end, and I stopped looking at the photographs other than what I saw on Brendan's channel. I want to be surprised and shocked by the story, but because I'd seen that bit in trailers and pictures, I just wasn't. Another downer that I have with Lux is the fact that he has to sing his song, even if he is not on the screen. So Mr. Pye plays Mr. Ringading's song, and the Doctor and Belinda are able to escape to go and speak to him. Yeah, okay. It was a bit of a sort of lame duck. I wanted a bit more action. However, that aside, there are a lot of soapy elements in this. In this case, though, they did this with the characters, not the doctors. They did this with the supporting characters. The main character that they did this with was Mr. Pie. They made his story quite sad, actually, and I think it was trying to get into the feels of people watching it. It was trying to add depth to the storyline. He's a very sad character, and he is manipulated by Mr. Ringading to keep feeding him light via the projection screen in the return for seeing his wife. Now, this leads to one of my favourite shots of the entire story, and it's the one where he's dancing with his wife. His wife, the skin colour, when he's dancing with her, her skin colour is mottled, and it looks like how it does in the film footage. You know, that was just an afterthought. But how they did it was pretty clever, because I thought at first he was dancing with a corpse. I genuinely believed that he was dancing with a corpse that had been reanimated. When she returned to colour, I realised that he was dancing with film footage of his wife. But I really do like that shot. I guess I'm just morbid sometimes. It is, though, with Mr. Ringading and Mr. Pie that, you know, they tell us how much it's pretty much going to be resolved, and RT did that on purpose for his dig, basically. So we already know that Mr. Ringading feeds off light because he is a god of light. So I was able to figure out that it would have been something to do with light. Mr. Ringading says that the film footage explodes when set on fire. I figured that it would involve some kind of explosion and that there would be some mass source of light energy. So it was fairly predictable. And once the Doctor had exposed the fact that he had regeneration energy, I knew what was going to happen. Naturally, of course, Mr. Ringading was going to be very interested in that energy and that light source coming from the Doctor. So naturally, of course, he wants it for himself. RTD in this makes a very big point, which I'll get into later. But we say, us fans, we say that it's way too obvious. So then he tries to do something less obvious in this, but it didn't work, because one of the things that seems to be common with RTD is that he likes to throw around the use of regeneration energy. It's something that he's done pretty early on. For example, when David Tennant's hand got cut off, or David Tennant's Doctor's hand got cut off, and then he grew it back. He stores it in that vial, that jar, and then he siphons off the regeneration energy later in Series 4 when he is shot by the Daleks. So he just goes zzz, and he also installs regeneration energy on Donna so that she has a little regeneration moment. It has become overused. It was used very sparingly in Classic, and the only plot device that it had, the plot point that it had, was to go into the next Doctor. That was what it was supposed to help with. That was the only thing it was created for. But he uses it how he sees fit nowadays. It does create a pothole in this case. Mr. Ringading is absorbing the regeneration energy, and he keeps absorbing it, and then when the Doctor gets saved by Belinda and Mr. Pie, where does that regeneration energy go? Or sorry, bigeneration energy go? Why is the Doctor not withered and dying at this point? Why is Ncuti not splitting off? Because they've created bigeneration or biregeneration or whatever it's called, and they just used the regeneration energy when they felt like they needed to. What it has done is it's removed the jeopardy that Doctor Who used to have. If you're going to be clever with regeneration energy, then you need to think it through with how you're going to do it. How do we know now that these pantheons do not have this regeneration energy to start throwing around? It makes me think of the best line in the entire story, which ironically comes from Shooty himself. He says to the policeman, "Your continuity is terrible." He says that at the point where the policeman enters, and we see Tommy's mother come in with this policeman. However, in this case, if my memory serves me correctly, Lux has no clue who Tommy's mother is. Talk about pointing out a continuity error in Lux, whilst the story in that very same scene presents itself with a continuity error. I mean, come on. I sometimes wonder who on earth checks RTD's scripts. Whilst this story definitely had a much better opening, it always seems to be it's my way or the highway with RTD. He was trying to be really clever with this story, and there's a lot of things that just don't pay off in it. It was a pretty slow start, other than that little opening, and it was a bit of a mystery, and it does pick up. However, when it does pick up, it becomes very messy, and it almost, not quite, it almost convolutes itself, and then for me, that's where it starts going downhill personally. They shouldn't have put the Doctor and Belinda into 2D animation. This made me wonder if this was going to be an everyone lives moments. Thankfully, we didn't have that. Not that I wish for people's demise or anything like that. But the resolution of how they had to get out of it, I thought that was a little bit, well, silly. They had to have in-depth thoughts. And because they were having in-depth thoughts, that meant they then became more 3D. But doesn't that convolute itself? The reason why I say that is because the Doctor pretty much says that he couldn't use his brain because he was in 2D. So why would you have an in-depth thought if you are in 2D and your brain is not doing what it is supposed to be doing? And we were to believe that they were also scared at this point. We should have seen this in live action. We should have seen this on the screen. Now, just whilst I think about it, all these Pantheon of Gods storylines have been, well, they've been a bit crazy. The only one that's made any real sort of sense, aside from how he was defeated, was the Toymaker's story, The Giggle. I feel like with these Pantheon of God storylines, what RTD is trying to do is he's trying to make it go as crazy as possible, but there's very little payoff. I don't mind them being crazy, but you can't convolute yourself, and you really have to have an epic finish. This story does lack that a fair bit. He could have spent more time focusing on the story rather than trying to be metatextual. Before I get to the metatext, I just want to address one thing very quickly. Belinda swears. All right, it's not the biggest swear word in the world. It's not the naughtiest swear word. But this is going out before the watershed. Okay? That shouldn't be in there. It doesn't matter how old the young person is. It's pre-watershed, so it shouldn't really be in there. And just for context, the phrase that she used, we're still inside a bloody film, and I'll probably get demonetized for even trying to say that. Okay, let's address the metatextual stuff. RTD is trying to do metatext. Okay? In this story, that's what he's trying to do. I made a comment about this on X, and I also said as a joke he was a bit miffed that Blink was people's favourite stories, to which somebody took very seriously. for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, there's a whole scene about Doctor Who being a TV show. Oh, yes. It went there. It was a very weird thing. And it's something that perhaps Jonathan Nathan Turner perhaps would have implied. And I can't remember which story it was that he did that in, but it cuts off before it says Doctor Who in the classic era. Russell T Davis in this case, he did not imply it. He went there. Boy, oh boy. There was this whole scene dedicated to the Doctor and Belinda and some fans sitting in the living room. They were finding out that they are just characters in a TV show and that these people were genuine Doctor Who fans. They throw in every rib that you could possibly do to people who have left the fandom. And this is also how you date your show extremely badly. So this scene has three extra characters in this room with the Doctor and Belinda. One is wearing a Tom Baker scarf and what looks like to be a unit top. One is wearing a fez and a Cyberman top that says Talos on it. The other lady is wearing a Beat the Meat top and is holding what appears to be the John Pertwee sonic screwdriver. And behind them you can see DVDs and figurines of Doctor Who, and these characters are saying, "We're your biggest fan," and one of them says, "I knew this would happen because it was leaked online, hashtag RIP Doctor Who." Oh my goodness. Now, I'm not offended by this, but I can imagine that there were a lot of people who didn't take kindly to that being in there. That was a blatant dig at the fandom who have been tweeting the hashtag RIP Doctor Who since the Jodie Whittaker era. Of course, naturally, the leaks online happen all the time, but the hashtag RIP Doctor Who was not something that was needed. In fact, scratch that, reverse it. This whole entire scene is not something that we needed. Then the Doctor finds out that he is not a real person, he is fake, and the same with Belinda. These two characters that are supposed to be defeating Mr. Ringading are sat there, right, in someone's living room, having a conversation about Doctor Who and a cup of tea. Once they get over the fact that they're not real, then, you know, they get back to action. I think this is a very blatant message to tell the fans or former fans or whatever, to remind us that this is just a TV show. However, to a lot of people, this has taken a large chunk of their lives. They've dedicated a long time to it, so they take it very seriously. I know it's taken up a long part of my life as well because I love it. There's one character that says, "I've seen every single episode." Now, you may have noticed I might have said episode earlier by mistake, okay? And when I do that, I get some comments telling me it's not called an episode, it's known as a story. It has happened. It doesn't happen on every video when I do that by mistake. Well, let's call this one out. RTD, it's a story, it's not an episode. There is also a bit as well that the Doctor is trying to get them to say that one of his stories is their favourite story. And they kept saying that Blink was their favourite story. That's where the joke on X comes from with me. That joke that I made that someone got really sort of like serious about RTD being miffed, that everyone says Blink is their favourite story. I don't believe that, by the way. I don't believe he's miffed. I just thought it was a funny statement. Now, ironically, even though the Doctor is listing off all of these stories and they keep saying Blink, well, maybe, I wondered, maybe subconsciously this is RTD saying, I know these stories are not up to the standard that they could have been. However, I highly doubt it. So they made digs at the people in the fandom as well who said that the ending is too obvious. And not being funny, but in this case, it was too obvious. So fans say that they don't exist, but later on that we do find out that they did really exist. So we were served some blatantly obvious, more metatextual stuff that Doctor Who is really just a TV show. They also pass comment, this is right at the end, okay, that Mr. Ringading changes his motives and that they were surprised by that. No, he doesn't really change his motive. There was no twist around it. He wants light and energy in order to survive. So what does he get? He gets light, and then he sees more light and more energy, so he takes advantage of that. So no, his motive wasn't changed. He just saw that somebody could produce a lot of light and energy, so he was like, right, well, I'll have that because that is stronger than that. The whole entire scene added absolutely nothing to the story at all. It just took off approximately 4 to 5 minutes. There was nothing that was creative about it. It was RTD's attempt at metatextual, and it just did not go down well. It was not well received. I would rather have storytelling than him date this story. That's my opinion on the fan scene. I'm not offended. It just wasn't needed. Oh, and by the way, in that scene, he cries again. Yeah. You won't be surprised to learn that the Doctor does not save the day either. It's Belinda and Mr. Pye that do that. He tells her that he knows what time of day it is, and she's like, yeah, oh, let's blow up the movie footage. I think it should have been Belinda that was tied up and taken hostage, and the Doctor attempting to work it out. But we've got to have the strong, independent woman in Doctor Who. And naturally, of course, the Doctor has to be taken hostage. But like I've said, there's no jeopardy in the Doctor dying because of the Regeneration storyline. We know that he is not going to die because he could just regenerate and split off into two. The only one of the two that had potential to unfortunately die is Belinda, but she wasn't going to be put into any kind of jeopardy. The only characters that were put into any major kind of jeopardy in this whole entire story were the ones at the beginning. I did think, though, that Ncuti was a lot better in this story. I think when he plays it down, he is a lot better consistently. I still don't like the honey and the babes and the things like that. I'm not into that. That's not how the Doctor speaks. I don't think it's needed. And there was a line where Belinda says, he's like Scooby-Doo, and he says, honey, I'm Velma. And later she says, come on, Velma. And he says, come on, Fred. I definitely do not get the Doctor from him. However, if he had started out this way and built on this, I think people would like him more as the Doctor. However, because he did not start out this way and he's not written this way, he's not given us the best that he possibly can. I've mentioned it before, he needs more of the sort of rise and fall in his character portrayal. He did it more here than he ever has done. He didn't need to cry, though. That scene where he cried in the fan scene, that did not warrant any tears whatsoever. And I think it was good to see the TARDIS being used a little bit more in this story. They spent all that money on this pretty bland TARDIS that can change colour inside, and they've barely used it at all. I have one issue with that scene in the TARDIS when Ncuti pulls the lever for them to fly through the vortex. For some reason, they have wide panning shots, and I don't know why. And it happens every time we see it. It happened in the Robot Revolution as well. I don't think that's necessarily really good cinematography or storyboarding. We, only get about 1 or maybe 2 minimal angles, and the positioning is really, really bad. I don't know. I just don't like it. I think they need to be more creative, but maybe they don't have the space in this new TARDIS design. That one scene, though, is pretty much all that we see of the TARDIS in this. We know that RTD does not like staying in the TARDIS. What a shame. All that money, and, well, it's not being used all that much. Now let's talk about Mrs. Flood. She is definitely what I would consider to be the Susan Twist of the last series. I do think that she is a Pantheon as well. Well, that's just a theory. I don't know if that's true. However, she seems to be everywhere over the Doctor's timeline, so I'm wondering if perhaps she is connected to Sutekh in some way. You never know. Or she could be the main Pantheon. Who knows, really? However, there was a reference to modern day again. Mrs. Flood says, "If you want to see a good show, darling, I recommend this one." Then the TARDIS disappears and she says, "Better warn you though, limited run only. Show ends May the 24th. I did a double check on these dates and this show does end on Saturday, the 24th of May 2025. So once again, we've got another modern day reference to the show itself. I know this has freaked out some of the fans who think that the show may be cancelled and they don't want it to be cancelled. I think the show needs to rest, but you know, that's a whole different video and I have spoken about it in the past here on this channel. I don't like all the business of the modern day references that RTD has made throughout this entire story. You've got it set in 1952, you make reference to the segregation, which would have been accurate for the time actually, and you've got this opportunity, even though it has technically been done in Doctor Who, to work on that segregation mention a little bit more and do something around that. However, Russell T Davies did not do that. I suppose it would have been too much, maybe. I don't know. If this story had been told through the perspective of Doctor and Belinda for the story of segregation, who knows? So instead he had a cartoon threat with the Pantheon of Gods, Lux the god of light, but he peppered in way too many modern day references that dated this story extremely badly. And those modern day references, in particular the fan scene, is what took me out of the story. I don't often say anything out loud when I am watching Doctor Who because I want to be immersed in it. However, this is the first time I have gone, oh, for goodness sake, come on. Okay, it's pretty tame, but it was not needed, these modern day references in a historical setting. We could have learned history, we could have learned about the picture house. This is like taking Doctor Who's original format, its original concept, and saying that I can set it in 1952, but let's not bother keeping it in 1952. Let's remind ourselves of the present day as well at the same time. There are good points about this story, but those good points unfortunately got waylaid because of the harsh bringing out of the story into reality. And that's unfortunate because Ncuti gave a much better performance here. Belinda was far more tolerable as well. The cast wasn't too big, so it benefited from that. You had a really good chance as well, if you think about it theoretically, to do a bottled story with just 4 characters in it. There's so many things in this story that could have been developed and worked on really well, but it just missed the mark. I know a lot of people did enjoy it though. Let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. There'll be a classic review up tomorrow at 4 p.m. and possibly we'll talk about the overnight ratings if they come out. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.